There we go. Okay. So we should be recording now. So as I mentioned up here in this top section, this is your menu bar. We're going to come back to this here and go through some quick examples of it as well. But before we do that, let's create a new document so we have something we can actually look at. So there are multiple ways you can do this, just like in any software. Of course, we could click on the quick button, which says create new over here in the left-hand side. We could also go up to the menu bar to the word file, new document, or we could use the keyboard shortcut, which is Command N on your keyboard. So go ahead and choose one of those three options. So when this little pop-up window appears, again, it's broken down into different categories. You can see them listed right here at the top. First of all, we're looking at the section called recent. So the most recent document sizes that we had created are going to be listed here. And again, you'll see some of the unit of measurements. These are actually not pixels or inches. These are picas, which is typically the default unit of measurement in InDesign. And I don't know why they continue to leave it that way. It's probably one of the least used unit of measurements, but you can actually set that up as a different default. So if you're doing mainly print work, obviously inches is probably the unit of measurement you would want to use. If you're doing web or mobile work, you would probably want to use pixels. Now, if you're going to do that and you want that to be the default of the software, you would actually do that in the preferences window, which we're going to see here in just a little bit. But if we're wanting to do it to a specific file or document that we're creating, then we would go over here to the right-hand side, and you can see this units with a drop-down menu, which currently says picas. Now, you can choose the specific unit of measurement here, but if you also go into the three categories of print, web, or mobile, you'll notice that it'll automatically default to what is considered the most standard now. However, again, when we're dealing with print, for whatever reason, it defaults to picas. So in this case, I don't want to work in picas. I want to create my document in inches. So I'm just going to choose that from the dropdown. You'll also notice I have very common print sizes, such as a letter size page, legal size, tabloid, etc. If you scroll down, they also provide some templates that you can take advantage of so that you don't have to create something 100% from scratch. That's actually a new feature. I think it was added about one or two versions before this current one. So definitely something you can look into. But we're going to stick pretty basic for right now, just choosing a print file, letter as our size. Now over here on the right-hand side, of course, I could go in and customize the width and height if I wanted to change that. I could also indicate whether it's a vertical or horizontal layout. I can control the number of pages. So we want to change this to 4 pages. You'll also see an option that says facing pages. Facing pages is like a book. It means you have a page to the right and a page to the left. If you didn't want facing pages, of course, you would deactivate this or uncheck it. If you're going to number the pages, and this isn't numbers that necessarily appear on the physical pages, it's just numbering the individual pages themselves as far as the window that you're going to be viewing here in a little bit. You can control at what point does that page numbering start. So right now, the default, of course, is going to be page 1. If I wanted a default text frame to automatically be on the pages, then I would check mark this box. Columns has to do with the number of column guides on a page, which you can use for design assistance. And I'll show you how to formulate that here in just a little bit. Now, as we progress, we can also have columns within our text frames, and those columns may or may not have anything to do with the actual page column guides. They're 2 separate elements. Now, if you are going to implement more columns, you can control what's called the column gutter. That's the space in between the columns. So I can either increase or decrease that space by utilizing this field right here. The default, of course, is this 0.1667 inches. If you scroll down a little bit further, we get into our margin settings. You'll notice over here that we have a little chain link button. And when that's activated, when I type in a new measurement and then click in another field, they will all change to the same value. So they're all linked together. If on the other hand, I want to have a different set of margins, maybe my top and bottom margins are going to be different than my side margins, then I would I would click on this button to break the link, and then I could put individual values in these 4 fields. Scrolling down a little bit further, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Scrolling down a little bit further in the bleed and slug area. So bleed is the area outside of the edge of the page. And the reason you would have a bleed area is if you're gonna actually print ink to the edge of a page, we actually wanna extend that artwork past the page edge, because in most cases, when items get printed, they get printed on larger paper than what the finished product size is gonna be. And so they have to come back and cut or trim that product. So when they cut, to make sure that the blades have some leniency as far as if they cut too short or cut too wide, by extending our artwork beyond the page edge, it gives us that bit of error protection, if you will. And so in most cases, you're gonna have a you're gonna have an 1/8 of an inch bleed on any side where the ink is gonna go all the way to the edge. And so that equals 0.125 in inches, by the way. And again, that bleed fields are all linked together. But if you wanted to make one side less or a larger bleed, and of course you would click on the same link button to break the link, and then you could individually input those values there. Now notice, you probably didn't see me type in IN for inches, and that's because I didn't. And so by default, because we've already said that this page is gonna be using inches, I can just simply type in something like 0.5, click in another field, and it automatically assumes it should be in inches. The other nice feature about InDesign is let's assume that I forgot to change this units to inches, and it's using the default of picas in the actual document that I'm working on. That's okay, because you can go to any field and type in an inches amount, and it'll automatically convert it to the correct pica equivalent if that's the unit of measurement that you're using, or vice versa. Let's say I set up my document to be in inches, I type in a value of picas, it'll automatically convert it into the equivalent inches amount. So that's a nice feature about InDesign, especially depending on what you're using as a default versus what you actually type into the fields. The slug area is an area that's outside of the page also. Typically it's there if you want to leave notes to whoever is printing the document, so that, maybe for example, you've identified on your page there's supposed to be a coupon, and you put a dashed pink line around that coupon area, and you don't want that dashed line to print. You're just using that so that someone knows this space is a coupon. Then in our slug section, we would want to write a note that says, hey, that pink dashed line you see on the file is not to be printed. It's only for a visual reference. So typically your slug area is usually at the top or bottom of your page. So I'm going to put a value of 1 inch in the top slug field. Notice when I click in another field, the other 3 still remain at 0. That's because by default, the slug area is not linked. It's automatically already broken, because in most cases, you only put a slug in one section. However, if you did want a slug all the way around the document of equivalent size, you would click on this button and link it all together. Now, if this is a document setup that you're going to be using in the future, you might want to save it or save the preset. And so if you scroll back up to the top in this top right-hand corner, you're going to see a button that kind of looks like a hard drive. When you place your cursor on it, you'll see it says Save Document Preset. So I'm going to click on that button. It then gives us an opportunity to name it. You can call it whatever you want to. And when you hit Save, you'll now see over here in the Saved section the name of that preset. So if I want to recreate this document again sometime in the future, now instead of me having to go through all these individual categories, all I have to do is click on this thumbnail. And so that's what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and select this thumbnail, click the create button,